The Bellydance Festival circuit. What the heck is going on and where the heck do we go from here? We've gone from more money, more problems to less money, same problems. And over the years and over the generations, we've been dealing with a changing number of variables, but it seems as though we're still dealing with the same problems. As the years have gone by and we've seen the rise and fall of many festivals, and it still seems to be happening today, but they all seem, even though they can start for different reasons and progress for different reasons, and they can also cancel for different reasons or end for different reasons, we're still dealing with the same conflicts. And what I find is with these major festivals or these big or long-running festivals, anytime that they end, we take it all very personally because of everything that this dance and this community means to us. But the thing that I find is what is talked about last and what is talked about least is the money. So it can often be awkward to talk about money because things do get rather personal. But I think if we talk about just the money, you'll find it's a lot more personal than you may think. So I'm going to give you a little guide here to socioeconomics and how it applies to the Bellydance Festival circuit. So basically, socioeconomics is just a guided way to talk about money and politics and how it personally pertains to you or to a group. But it actually is a way to kind of break it all down and see where money comes from, where money goes, and how it applies to you, and what type of power that type of exchange has and gives. So if you look at this list over here at over my shoulder, I kind of have a list of the major pieces that are involved in putting together a major festival. So right at the top, you have the producers, and then right at the bottom, you have the participants. And between the producers and the participants, you have this long list in between. Now, I'm starting with the top and the bottom because those 2 points on this list are the most important. Because were it not for the producers that put these events together, they're the ones who make it happen. But at the bottom where the participants are, those are the ones who make it work. So the producers plan the festival, they produce it to happen, they build it, and then the participants come. And without the participants, the festivals would not work. So when I say work and happen, here's the difference. The producers are the ones who plan for it, arrange it, and they basically plan the party. But the participants, those are the ones who pay to play. And without them paying for it, none of this would happen, and all of this economic exchange would not be able to happen. So underneath the producers, and again, this goes into what it takes to plan a festival. If you're planning a big festival, you need to have your top shelf filled first. Now, your top shelf, that's going to be all of your headliners. So all of your superstar dancers, the top contemporaries of the field, your living legends, your pioneers, the ones who paved the way and the ones who are setting the bar for the high belly dance standard. That's going to be your top shelf. Your mid-shelf, those are going to be the ones that fall just underneath. And those are going to be I proudly call myself a mid-shelfer. But those are basically the ones who are a little bit later in the generation. Perhaps they haven't been dancing as long. Perhaps they don't have quite as much experience or training. Or they just haven't quite seasoned themselves. Or they just haven't built up their career or established quite a body of work as the ones who came before. So these are going to be the ones who are, I guess you could consider, your emerging artists. And then below the top shelf, you have your up-and-comers. Now, your up-and-comers, those are the ones who are basically like your crowd favorites. They're the new ones who are coming up into the scene, and they're kind of starting to generate some buzz, and they're starting to be known as good dancers within the community, and not just within their local community. Underneath your up-and-comers, you have your hometown heroes. And your hometown heroes, those are going to be the ones who are your local crowd favorites, the ones who are pillars of their community, the ones who are dancers who started in their local community and they quickly began to flourish, or they just became crowd favorites in their local dance communities. So when they're in festivals that are in the area that draws people, then they're happy to see them. So those are all very important key elements in producing your festival, is that when you first start planning your workshops or who's going to be the headliner for your show, the first thing that producers are going to be looking at is who is going to be in the top shelf. And the reason why they do that is because it's just like selling a product. The thing that you want to do is give the people what they want, and who is it that they want to train with? What is the hottest commodity in the industry right now? And then just beneath that is where you're going to have your second most requested products, which is where you get your mid-shelf. And the up-and-comers and your hometown heroes, those usually pertain more to, in the Bellydance festival circuit, those usually get prioritized where they get put in the shows. So it is equally as important to put just as much focus into the lineup of your show as you do with the lineup of your workshops. Because, as we all know, yes, a lot of people are, it does take a certain amount of people to fill workshop space to pay for not just the expenses incurred for producing a workshop, but it also takes a large amount of money from ticket sales in the show to help produce an event as well. Because there's only a certain type of person that's going to pay money and reserve time to go to a belly dance workshop. But there's definitely a broader group of people or a broader group of customers that's willing to pay tickets to go see a show. So it's just as important to have good teachers as it is to have good performers when producing a large event. So once you get the workshops and the shows taken care of, then that's when the vendors start coming into play. So if there's going to be dancers who are there for workshops and there's going to be people who are there to see shows, then of course you're going to have vendors. It makes sense. So how do belly dancers get their work uniforms? Whether it's for class or whether it's for the stage, whether it's just to have extra merchandise to sell, or maybe it's just to have fun mementos. But that's where your vendors come into play, and they're also such an important part of this economy. So these are all important things to have: your instructors, your performers, and your vendors, because all of these things help determine your participants. These are the people who are going to come to the festival to see the souk and to see the vendors that are in the vending area. These are the people who are going to come watch the shows. These are the people who are going to come take the workshops. So it does take a producer or a team of producers to plan this whole event, but it takes the participants' participation in order for all of this to happen, because at the end of the day, it's all going to cost. So with this little breakdown here, and you see how they're all kind of interrelated like this, I'm going to break it down a little bit more and talk about how they're more specifically related through money. But before I do that, I'm going to have to plug my laptop back in because I just got the low battery warning. And we're back! So, when we talk about producing a festival and how the stuff needs to be paid for, and how it's mainly paid for with participants, let's think of some of the ways that when a festival is being produced, where are ways that money needs to be paid in order to make it happen? Well, you're going to pay for your admission to go into your workshop. You're going to pay for your admission to get into the show or to purchase a ticket. A lot of these festivals require day admission if you're going to see the vendors, or if you need a day pass to be there to see the open stage. And then if there's going to be a contest involved in the festival, there might be a registration fee. Some festivals that have applications to perform on the open stage, they might have an application fee. Then there's also going to be what you purchase if you purchase anything from the vendors themselves. And then if you're performing, then there might also, there's usually going to be a photographer or a videographer who's there that you could pay to order video footage or pictures from your performance, or you could arrange a photo shoot. With the vendors, they all have to pay a vending fee and a lot of times an application fee to even apply to vend, let alone if they get accepted as well. So there are all of these points in which there are ways to pay for money. Oh, with advertising, you're going to have to pay for taking out ad space in a program. So, with all of these elements that are going into this festival to help it make money, you see that it just goes far beyond not just how much we make and how much we sell, but there's a lot of money that goes into that go into these festivals. So it's not just a matter of how much goes in, but how it gets distributed. So, with the money that goes in, when you do look at that and you see all of the avenues that are a means of getting money in that help produce the festival, this is when you kind of see how much it can cost. So, a lot of times we have seen all of these festivals that pop up where someone says, you know what, I think I want to try producing. Or other people go to festivals and they see what it's like and think, you know what, why don't we have something like this here? If you're in an area that is starved for any type of exposure or instruction or quality performance of belly dance, and you think that you can undertake producing an event, by all means, try and do it. But please do not do it on a whim. We constantly talk about how there's oversaturation and there's too many events. Well, perhaps you should go to some of these events and talk to the producers. Perhaps you should see what it's like for the people who work behind the scenes. There's going to be countless people who work or volunteer to make this happen. And we all know this because I'm sure at most points we've either seen these people or we've been those people. So they can tell you about all of the moving pieces that are involved in that. And if you're willing to take on that type of responsibility and that stress, if you think you can handle it, then good. And I've known some very well-intentioned people who thought that they could handle something like that. And yes, they had the character to handle that type of stress. They had the tenacity to handle that type of workload. But the thing that they just could not handle was the financial undertaking. Because when producing an event, no matter what size, you're still going to have to look at the cost of booking, securing, and paying for a venue for the workshop. The same goes for booking, securing, and paying for the venue of a show. And then if there's any type of insurances or security deposits that are involved with that, then paying for the advertising, and then you have to book your artist. And with booking your artist, there's contracts that are usually involved. So there's a security deposit for them to save the date. You might have to pay for their travel expenses like airfare and luggage fees and ground transportation. You might have to pay for their hotel. And then there's food. Sometimes there are artists who have in their contract that you have to pay for their food. And what if you're sponsoring a dancer that's from another country? Well, then there's work visas. Then you might have to hire a translator. So even just in getting one artist to come to your area, look at how much money you're investing in just getting the plane ticket, the airfare, and paying for their teaching fees, paying their performance fee. You haven't even looked at how much money needs to be generated in order to break even. So how many students need to pay to take workshops? How many people need to purchase tickets for the show? What is your break even point? Because if it comes down to it that you don't have enough students or you don't have enough audience members in the show to pay for it, well, guess who signed the contracts? You did. So you may have thought that you could take on all the work and the stress, but you also assumed that financial responsibility. And if you don't have any type of contingency plan to help you, then not only are you harming yourself, but you're harming those who are directly connected to you. Because what happens if you ask what happens if you ask one of your friends or one of your family members or one of your dance colleagues to join in with you into this business venture? Because that's exactly what it is. And that's a good way to injure a friendship, to go in so confidently with this proposal to produce an event, and then it's not financially successful, and now you and your best friend have your name signed on a dotted line agreeing to pay thousands of dollars that you cannot afford to pay back. So not only does that hurt you personally and professionally, and that can also hurt your relationships, but if you produce an event that goes belly up, then that hurts the reputation of yourself as a business person, that hurts the reputation of yourself as a dancer, and then also hurts your reputation as a community member. Because for whatever reason a festival may cancel, the thing that it harms the most is it harms the community with the participants, because now they don't have a community event in which they can be amongst peers and equals, but also as dancers who are hungry students, now they no longer have this opportunity or future opportunities to get workshops from instructors that they normally wouldn't. So they've now lost that opportunity to have access to education. So when festivals cancel for whatever reason, it's not just sad in the sense that the spirit of the festival dies, but that community resource to education and to be amongst peers and to have exchange, that gets lost. But also the ability for the people who work as instructors and performers and vendors, they also lose that opportunity to make money. So that's just the big scheme of things when it comes down to a festival cancellation, is all of this stuff that happens in between. But it's not just a festival that cancels or that goes belly up that can cause these huge ripples economically. The other ways that it can do this is when you start to produce a festival, or if you're going to attend a festival, the biggest thing is when you look at the cost, because this is a pay-to-play sport no matter how you choose to participate. Whether you're at the bottom as a participant, or whether you're at the top as a producer, or anywhere in between, we all know that there's nothing cheap or remotely free about your participation in the Bellydance Festival world. So I think the biggest question that we need to ask ourselves, first and foremost, is that when we're going to participate in a festival, whether we're putting it on or whether we're working at it or we're going to go to participate in it, the biggest thing you have to ask is, can it be afforded? Can I afford to go, and can other people afford to go? So, and when I say, can other people afford to go, if you're the producer, obviously you need to make sure that your festival is affordable enough for people to attend, but it's charged correctly enough into which it can be paid for. But as a participant, you have to think, can I afford to go, and can other people afford to go? And you have to consider if other people can afford to go, because God forbid you're the only person who signs up and there's hardly anybody there. Because if you see that it's not going to be easily affordable, don't break yourself and harm your ability to attend other festivals just to go to this one. But also, if it's not affordable to you, then perhaps it's not affordable to other people. And if these festivals pop up with these price tags that are absolutely unaffordable, then how is it that people can go? If it's unrealistic for some, then it could be unrealistic for most. And if a lot of people can't go, then it's time to get real. Then it's time for the producer to say, perhaps this festival isn't going to work. Perhaps I can nip this in the bud before I have to assume more debt. I can tell the dancers that I've booked that we'll have to cancel this because I won't be able to afford to pay them. So they can in turn book more work. And that affects your top and your mid shelf, and a lot of times your up and comers. So the time is precious, and if you don't speak up and say, hey, you can come to my event, but I'm not going to be able to pay you, then you're not only yes, it may be upsetting, but you're going to save yourself some embarrassment in the long run, and you're going to save some hurt feelings, because now these dancers can try to find other bookings if dancing is their source of income. But also, in going into, can I afford it, so many of the dancers who are so supportive of the instructors and the performers that they go to see and go to train with, a big thing that they pride themselves on is knowing where their money goes. So they want to make sure that their money goes towards festivals that treat their artists ethically, that treat their participants not just respectfully, but keep them in a safe environment. So if you're attending a festival that is constantly getting more expensive, but you're not seeing any type of expansion, you're not seeing any type of growth, you're not seeing anything that benefits you as a participant, then that's something that's important as well. Because a lot of these festivals that have been going on for a very, very long time, and they've been doing what they do very, very well, which is a testament to their longevity, but also the amount of people that go and the type of people that go. It really does speak highly to the way that they run their festival. But you do have to ask yourself, if the festival does not seem to be growing, if the festival does not seem to be flourishing, if the festival is not consistent in perpetuating a safe, friendly, and most importantly, festive environment, then where's all of that money going? So, and that is something that you can be concerned with, because that is a place where you send your money. That is a place where you spend your time. So a big part of that is an investment. So you do get a say in somewhat of that, where you choose to spend your time and your money. So the participants have a lot of power and a lot of say. And where that power and where that say comes from where you choose to spend your money and where you choose to spend your time. And I think the important thing to look for when you go to look at a festival is, again, who's going to be teaching there? How long has this festival been going on? What types of instruction has been there? But also with other participants, have they gone? What are they saying about it? Because this is a word of mouth industry. Now, when we also take these things into consideration, it's not just a matter of, I want to go there because XYZ people are going to be there. And it's not just a matter of, okay, well, the workshops are affordable and the tickets are affordable, so now I just have to worry about getting there. Well, with your transportation costs, that's the hugest part of it if you're traveling from out of state or out of the country. Because again, airfare, hotel fare, work visas, and food. But not only those things, tax and your income. So with tax, what happens when you come from a place where minimum wage is less than $10 an hour? What happens when you come from a place where your sales tax is less than 10%? And now you save up your money and you have what you think for you is a decent amount of money saved up. But you go to San Francisco, or you go to Los Angeles, or you go to Chicago, or you go to Miami, or you go to New York City, or you go to New Jersey, and you're in a place where their minimum wage is much higher and their sales tax is much higher because the cost of living is much higher. So what may seem like is cheap and affordable to you and your community may not be cheap and affordable in other communities. So not only is that something that you need to take into consideration, but that's something that producers need to take into consideration as well. And not just as it pertains to these festivals, but as it pertains to us as individual dancers, because socioeconomically, the cost of living and the taxes and the minimum wages, all of these things that get configured in, they change so much from state to state in the United States alone. But when you think of the belly dance world and the belly dance professional world altogether, we are kind of in a very, we're existing in pretty much the same window as far as what is the industry standard for how much that we make. And especially when it comes to restaurants, you're looking at a window of about, I'm going to say anywhere from $50 to $150, maybe $200, not including tips, that a dancer can expect to make depending on the size of the community and the cost of living in the city, for belly dancing at a restaurant show. But $150, if you include your pay from the restaurant and your tips from the customers, $150, anybody can do a considerable amount of bill paying with $150. Maybe that's a cell phone bill and some groceries. Maybe that's some insurance. Maybe it's renter's insurance or your car insurance. Maybe that's a decent chunk of maybe it's a decent chunk of your rent. Maybe it's a couple of full tanks of gas. But think of $150 compared to what that could mean for somebody who lives and works in Tulsa, Oklahoma, versus $150 for what that's going to do for somebody who lives in San Diego or somebody who lives in Oakland. That money is only going to go so far. So I think if we take more of a consideration of where our money comes, so it's not just where our money comes from and where it goes, but when you think of the fact that belly dancers make about the same amount of money per state, then and that it's only going to go so far in each state, that really does kind of put a different perspective on things like undercutting. But undercutting, that's a whole other conversation, which we'll have to get into in another time. So, like I said before, when festivals cancel, there's this huge community resource collapse that limits education and peer exchange and the ability for working professionals within the field to make money. But when we start seeing other elements like oversaturation, that's something that can affect a festival's ability to continue to operate as well. Because oversaturation is not just a matter of there being too many events going on at one time or too close together. Oversaturation is also a result of the same thing happening too much in succession. So yes, there may be some good work done with these big producers of these big long-running festivals and making sure that their festivals are not only affordable enough for people to participate, but that they're spaced out enough so people can afford to save up money to participate, take time off of work so they can go, or make sure that they can align their bookings so there's a window of opportunity for them to get to these festivals. There's all of that planning of time and money that does go into it. But I think a huge element which should be just as equally as important as the amount of events that are going on are the types of instructors that are there and the material that's being instructed, because there's so much cross-pollination that happens between communities, between festivals, between producers, between studios, and the same community is being advertised to, which is fine, because in business terms, that is just demographics. But one thing that we have lost sight of is something that is so true to the origins of this dance and the culture that birthed it and that is still attached to it. And that is that this dance is a tradition that is passed down through generations. And it gets passed down through generations and it stays alive within the culture and the community that it creates. So, but even still, with having a festival where you're trying to, in essence, groom future professionals, you want to have the ones who are the best teachers, who are the most established teachers. And that's determined by your top shelf. But if the top shelf is constantly the same and it's constantly limited, then it's only going to be the same select few people teaching the same material, and it's constantly being taught, but it's being circulated and then recycled across these same festivals. But if you're only advertising to the same group of people, then they're going to be learning the same amount of material and the same type of material. So yes, there are ways to do variations, and there are ways to adapt and to modify, and there are ways to add on to make things progressively more difficult. But if it's only going to be the same amount of people, then it does kind of lose its appeal. If you can predict that it's going to be the same lineup of instructors at a festival, it almost loses some of its appeal to go, because you know what to expect. You kind of you get past the honeymoon stage and you say, oh, well, I've been to that festival for 5 years. I've been to that festival for 10 years. And I can always count that there's going to be these instructors on a rotation that come. And you do still need to have your favorites, but when you're a veteran and you've been going for enough years to the same event for it to become predictable, then it becomes okay for you to say things like, maybe I can't afford it this year and I won't go, or I went when they had the exact same lineup the year before last, maybe I'll wait until they freshen it up. And in the time that it takes you to make that decision, it's like that. And just an instant that's just as quick, that festival can be canceled for any number of reasons. So you do need to kind of keep that passion for your dance and for your community and for your festival, but also it's the job of the producer to keep it interesting and to not just keep complete focus on the top shelf. It definitely is a priority, but you do need to make sure that you keep it interesting and keep it refreshing for your participants. So that way the festival stays a community resource. So that way it's a commodity and not just a novelty. So that's another important element of oversaturation, not just the amount of festivals, but the fact that the festivals are recycling. So if you're going to be collaborating with another producer in either not just with festival production, I don't think it should be just about cross promoting your events. What about co-producing events? Because if you combine your efforts to produce one big event, or perhaps you can produce smaller events and perhaps you could do 2 a year in your combined communities instead of one big one a year that competes with another one, then you can in turn share each other's networks from your communities and borrow from each other and cross-pollinate and cross-promote. But also, you're not trying to get 2 large festivals to just dance around each other. When they're dancing around each other, you're not just trying to make it equal and even and able for your same communities to participate with each other. But in essence, you're just passing the same amount of money back and forth to each other. So where that disconnect is, where this dance is generational, is I think the fact where we've lost the bar that sets our standards. We all talk about raising the bar, but we've kind of lost track of what sets that bar for us in the first place. And what I think used to set our bar were some of these big festivals. There were big festivals that were competitions, and if you won this competition, you went on and became somebody. You became a working professional dancer. There were some festivals that people could go to, and just from performing on the open stage, so many people got to see you perform that never heard or saw you before. And from one open stage performance, then you would be skyrocketed into becoming a household name within the circuit. There were other festivals where just the right people were there, and if you were taking the right classes, if you were performing at the right time of day, then it was quite literally the essence of what networking is. You could go to these festivals, be seen, be heard, be educated, and be exposed to such amazing things that would help put you in a path that you wanted to go down, whether it was being a teacher, or being a performer, or just being somebody who wants to be exposed to this as often as possible because it's amazing. There are countless reasons why we come to Bellydance, but there are so many reasons that we just can't explain. And I think the things that we can explain is the essence of the culture and the tradition. And the only thing that we can keep doing is keeping it moving forward. But we can't keep moving it forward if we're just constantly recycling and constantly advertising to the same group and same community. That does need to be a priority because demographics, that's the primary customer base. But how do you refresh that? How do you replenish it? How do you keep it going? And the way that you do that is by having events that can continue to keep going without saturating and overwhelming your primary customer base, but has an avenue to get more customers in, to to give people the experience that haven't experienced this before. And this is where you need to tap into your local community. And when I say local community, not your local belly dance community, but I mean your proximity, your neighbors, the people that live in your city. If you have a big festival, promote it in your local art section. Promote it with other local dance studios, perhaps that aren't involved in ethnic or cultural dances. Perhaps studios or dance companies or even just production companies that aren't familiar with belly dance, and show them that there's a whole bellyverse that is involved. There are workshops, there are shows, there are video shoots, there's photography sessions. There are all of these amazing facets of multimedia art that happen from this one genre of dance. Because think about the places where we belly dance: at outdoor festivals, in restaurants, in nightclubs, in bars. So much of people's first exposure to belly dance can happen in a non-belly dance environment. And perhaps some of us, our first exposure to belly dance wasn't in a belly dance environment. And that's what drew us in. So once we get sucked into the belly dance community, then we start seeing all of these opportunities and start creating all of these different goals. But we forget how we got sucked into the first place. And if we look back into how we got here in the first place, then perhaps we can start to think of other ways to get people to get other people in. Because if we're constantly recycling the same material, the same education, the same type of show formatting, if we're only passing it around to each other, what happens when we're not here anymore? So it's up to us to continue to pass it on and to continue to bring in more people, to bring in new people, so that way they could pass it on. And that's how not only we keep growing, but how we keep going. So those are big things that affect the festival, that can help it either grow or collapse in a very big way and in a very quick way. But another thing that can affect it economically is sort of an opt-out effect, if you will. Now, when I say opt-out, that means when someone needs to cancel for whatever reason. So I'm sure every producer or even every participant at a festival has either had their heart set on producing an event or participating in an event where there was going to be one special someone that was going to be there, someone who you've been dying to see perform live, somebody who you've been dying to take a workshop from for the very first time, and for whatever reason, they couldn't be there. So they had a health issue, they had a family crisis, or the festival was canceled, or perhaps there was some type of personal or political agenda that members of the festival were involved in that people did not feel comfortable aligning themselves in. So for whatever reason, that does have repercussions. So let's just say it's something small, and one top shelf instructor is unable to come. So if one of the top shelf instructors isn't able to come, well, then that affects the participants' mindset in not just not just their level of participation, but whether they're going to come or not. Imagine you're a participant and you see that for the very first time, one of the instructors that's on your belly dance bucket list is going to be coming to either a festival near you or a festival you plan on going to. And you buy your workshop admission, you buy your show ticket, and right before you're about to buy your plane ticket and book your airfare, you find out that that instructor got sick. And now they're not coming. So if that's the only instructor that you planned on taking from, or the only one that you could afford to take from, then there's a good chance that you might think twice about whether or not you're going to go, whether based on the fact that you can no longer take from them anymore, or if they don't find an adequate replacement. So that's a mindset that goes into the participant's mind when certain members of the top shelf can't be there. And because that's their first thought, they always want to be the first ones to purchase those workshop tickets in the event that it sells out. We've all seen that happen at many festivals where people buy their workshops before they even buy their transportation to even make sure that they can get there, but they buy the workshops before they sell out. And that's called being an alpha consumer. So if people alpha consume these workshops, but then they find out that that their first choice is no longer going to be available, well, then what do? They're going to then gauge their willingness to participate in the festival based on that. So what that does is you think, boom, first, I want what's on the top shelf. And after that top shelf is selected, then it starts to trickle down and you think, okay, who do I want to take from in the mid shelf? Who do I want to take from that's an up-and-comer that perhaps I've been inspired to take by, or perhaps they're teaching some material that I'm unfamiliar with and their workshop description sounds really interesting. When it comes to producing an event, when you look at the lineup of instructors, you always look at the top shelf first, and then you trickle down from there. So what happens in the event that a festival is happening and the entire top shelf opts out of participating? Well, then that decreases the level of participation for people who are going to take from the mid-shelf workshops. And then that reduces the amount of people who are going to take from the up-and-comers. And that also affects the show. So if the top shelf isn't filled, that reduces the level of projected participation, and that trickles down all the way down to the show. So if there's hardly any tickets sold for the show, why even keep the venue open? So on and so forth. So the money trickles down from producer to top shelf to mid shelf to up and comer to the home team. And then if there's nobody there to participate, what happens to these vendors who have to pay so much money for their vending space when they have to sell X amount of money, not just to break even on the vending fee, but think about all of the stuff that they have to bring with them. Think about how heavy it is for them to haul all of that stuff. What if they are flying with it? They have to pay for that, for the luggage. What if they are driving with it? They have to pay for the gas and the wear and tear on the vehicle. So a lot of times vendors are paying just as much money, if not way more so, than these participants. And what do? They sit there in the heat, or they sit there inside in the freezing air conditioning. So that way they can sell some of their merchandise in hopes that they could be a part of this whole economic structure. So when we think of where our money goes, it's also a matter of how does this money get exchanged? So when you see the fact that there are these vendors paying this money, and that your participants who are paying money to get into these festivals and to be a student and to be an audience member or to be a competitor or to be a performer, all of this money has to go somewhere. And if there's a producer that can't seem to keep all of this going, or if there's a producer that's able to keep a festival going for a very long amount of time, but isn't able to pay their artists a fair wage, or isn't able to pay them at all, where does all of this money go? There have been instances where we've seen festivals that have been, or events that have been crowdsourced. So if they've been crowdsourced by the community, that's great. But what is important with crowdsourcing websites is financial transparency. Now, what financial transparency means is you ask for a certain amount of money when you're crowdsourcing, but you have to say what that money is for. We need this much money for the venue. We need this much money for costuming or to pay the dancers. We need this much money for renting a studio for rehearsal time. Whatever it may be, you have to break down everything that is involved in producing if you're going to be crowdsourcing for that for an event. But the thing that is not considered is, okay, you break it down. Okay, you put your crowdsourcing video out there. Okay, what happens if you get all of that money? Congratulations! All of your production costs have been met. Now you can have your event. Now you can have your show. Now you can have your festival. But guess what? Pretty much everything that comes after that is now all profit. So now that you have this huge chunk of change that comes from your produced event, where does that money go? Is that going back into your production? Oh, is that going back into your production company? Is that going back into your dance company? Does that go into your school? Does that go into next year's festival? Does it go into the festival account? So this is what I was talking about before with making sure that the festival continues to go on, making sure that the participants are having a good time, that the people who are working at this festival are having a good time, making sure that all of the people who are supposed to be getting paid are getting paid. So when you see that there is all of this money and making sure that the money is being used responsibly, that's something that is super important. And every level of participation, whether you choose to be supportive or you choose to be a worker or you're just in it because there's something in it for you, no matter where you fall on this list, every single element is going to affect you. So we've talked about oversaturation. We've talked about cancellation. We've talked about opting out. We've talked about mismanaged money. We've talked about how all of these things are kind of interrelated and how one affects the other. But one thing that I do kind of want to talk about is when you're trying to work your way up. What happens if you're trying to work your way up from participant to hometown hero because you do have your goal set on being on the top shelf? Well, you see how I have all of this set up kind of in a hierarchy from producer being at the highest and participant being at the lowest? Well, guess what? If you want to be a professional dancer one day, if you want to be a superstar, well, guess what? That means that is a career goal. So if that is a career goal, then what you want to be when you grow up is to be on the top shelf. You want to be a top shelf dancer. So if you want to be a top shelf dancer and if you want to have this as a career, or if you want to have this even just as a job, if you choose to do this professionally, you need to look at it as a profession. And there have been too many times where I've seen dancers who are on the top shelf. They are superstars. They are legends. They are pioneered. And they have earned the right to be feared, revered, respected, fawned all over, fanboyed, fangirled, whatever. So they have acquired and accumulated that type of respect and adulation, and they are deserving of every little bit of it. But if you are a student and it is your desire to become a professional, not just out of respect for your mentors and for your idols, but out of respect for this craft and for this industry, you need to show respect for the craft and the industry, not just the individuals, but the big picture. And what I mean by that is you need to look at the reality of the situation, which is the fact that if your goal is to be a top shelf dancer, that means that your goal is to be the coworker of these dancers that you are constantly following. So trying to gush and groupie all over these dancers is not what's going to be what gets you hired. It's not what's going to be what gets you work, because like I said, your dream and your goal is for them to be your coworker one day. And if you want them to be your coworker, then you have to be hired by their boss. And who is their boss? Producers. So if your end game is to one day be a traveling, touring professional dancer who works this festival circuit, then you need to be going out there and participating in these festivals. You need to be seen. You need to be heard. You need to be active in the community. You need to be supportive in the community. And you need to show that you know that it's not just about knowing who's who, but it's also about knowing who fits where. And knowing that there is a very important lineage that is part of a very rich culture in this dance. And if you want to make money, or if you want to save money because you have to spend so much money to participate, I think you need to break it down and put the personal aside, put all of the little what ifs and the details aside, and just look at what is inarguable. And what is inarguable is money. What is inarguable is how to get a job. So, and that is by respecting the profession and respecting your hierarchy and respecting your money. What can I afford? How much does this cost? Can I make money doing this? Can I keep making money? Can I afford to keep doing this? Can people afford to keep coming to do this? So when you break it down to numbers, it's not just a matter of how I feel, what I think. There are so many ways that we can just break it down to inarguable fact. And then once we realize, you know what, it is more of a yes or it is more of a no, then we can fill in the gaps with all of our personal. But in the meantime, while we start thinking about some of these festivals that we either want to go to or that we like, or ones that we wish were a little bit better, then start asking yourselves, what do I really like about this festival? What do I not like about this festival? What are ones that perhaps I haven't even gone to yet? So, but I think more importantly, before you ever try to produce a festival, try going out to see as many as you can first and experience them in different areas. Look at the people who go. Look at the types of people who go. Look at the instructors that go. Look at the vendors that go. There are all of these different opportunities. There are all of these different dancers who are there, different vendors, different producers. So whatever questions you may have, whatever problems that you're going through, there can be this constant exchange. We don't just need to stand on a platform and just talk about our own personal problems. So what we need to do is exchange and not just commiserate, but I think we need to communicate and start talking about things like, well, how did you work through that in your community? Or what are the defining factors for your choices? So instead of saying how we feel, let's break down the facts, break down the numbers, and start saying what we want to do. So I like that we can be open and honest with each other and communicate about our feelings. But if all we do is just talk about how we feel, then we're just feeling. So I think we need to start to do more doing. So let's make an action plan. And I would like to use this as a platform to get people to start talking more about, what does the money mean? What does it mean to make money? What does it mean when we're spending money? And where do we want to see this money to go? Because this is a community, and it's a community-based art form. Artists for artists by artists. And the thing is, we are all artists, no matter what level of our participation is, because we were all new at some point, and we're all going to be going somewhere on this journey that we're on in the Bellyverse. So let's make sure that we're headed in the right direction, so that way we can keep going. So I would like to encourage you to kind of add some of your own comments and some of your own feedback, and perhaps talk about similar issues that you've experienced, or perhaps that you haven't felt that you've had the opportunity to talk about when it comes with money and your level of participation in the Bellydance festival circuit. So I hope this has been a little enlightening. I know it's kind of long because it's almost an hour, but money talks, and it's got a lot to say, and I think it's about time that we started saying a lot more about it, so that way we can start doing a lot more with it. So thank you for your time, guys, and I can't wait to hear what y'all say.